All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, I'm going to be reviewing a non-fiction title, Waterloo, by Bernard Cornwell. This is the history of 4 days, 3 armies, and 3 battles by Bernard Cornwell. His only non-fiction title, I believe. I have all of his novels. We'll pan through the library here. I have all of his novels over here on these 2 shelves. We've got some here, some down there. I've got all of them. They take about a shelf and a half just for all of them. But anyway, as you can tell, he's one of my favorite authors, and I have reviewed quite a few of his books, and he has signed a handful of my books, which I could show you, but they're all over there. But anyway, we're talking about Waterloo. Let's talk about the cover first, because you know I love graphic design and cover illustration. I really adore this cover. It's just looks elegant. It looks very Napoleon-esque in tone. It wraps around. It's really cool. Inside the book, aesthetically, we've got a lot of artwork, like a ton of artwork, a ton of maps. There's artwork on virtually about every 10 pages. There's just great pieces of art or maps, different photos of the characters. I don't know if they're actual photos, but you know, paintings of all the characters. Just an elegant looking book. Now I did buy this. One thing about this book that is special to me is when I went to Windsor Castle in London, England, or Windsor, England. After I visited the castle, I went down the street to a bookshop and saw this book there and bought it. I thought, oh, cool. I didn't know that Bernard Cornwell had written any nonfiction, so I bought it there. This is the British version. And then right next to the bookshop was a McDonald's. I went into the McDonald's, and lo and behold, that McDonald's there in Windsor, England, served and this is for really old people. McDonald's in America used to serve their apple pies, deep fried apple pies. They were the best bit of food ever invented. And then 25 years ago, McDonald's in America got rid of them. Well, then I found out that they still serve them in Windsor, England McDonald's, down the street from Windsor Castle, if you're interested. I bought like 50 of them. Anyway, Sharpe's Waterloo. This explains... so Sharpe's Waterloo was a book that Bernard Cornwell wrote in his Sharpe's Rifles series of about 25 books, and where Richard Sharpe goes through the Napoleonic Wars and sees most of the big battles. And of course, Richard Sharpe ends up at the Battle of Waterloo. And in Sharpe's Waterloo, Bernard Cornwell does the whole thing about Waterloo. But he said, as in the foreword to this book, while he was writing Sharpe's Waterloo, he got inspired. He always wanted to write a nonfiction book about Waterloo itself. So in his research for one novel led to this book being eventually written because he wanted to expand on the research for that. So it starts... you know, most of the action here takes place on June 18th, 1885, which was the final Battle of Waterloo. But then the previous 3 days, because it talks about a history of 4 days, the previous 4 days were other battles where surrounding the areas of Waterloo. Now, in 1814, the very beginning, it starts with the Duke of Wellington, who was one of the people that was integral to this battle. And years ago, he had noted that this little village of Waterloo, near Brussels, south of Brussels a little, looked like the very perfect spot to halt an invading army if there was ever to be an invading army. And they were thinking, well, Napoleon might invade. If we can direct him to this spot, maybe we can hold our ground. And so he made a note of that, which was good because it ended up happening that way, exactly. But he kind of sussed out the area way before the battle took place, thinking, gosh, if we can just have a battle here, we might win. Now, in the meanwhile, Napoleon himself was in Elba. So Napoleon was the ruler of France, went from ruling 44 million people to being outcast onto this island of Elba, which had like maybe 10,000 people. So he went from a big shot to a little shot real quick. But anyway, he ended up becoming a big shot again and, going back into war. So on June 18th, where most of the action takes place, the armies of France, Britain, and Prussia are all near Brussels fighting as Napoleon is trying to do his conquering thing. On June 18th, though, this is where all three of these armies sort of descend upon this quiet valley and this south of Brussels in this village of Waterloo. The 3 days previous, I don't want to give away a lot in this book because I don't want to tell you the whole history and all of the details. So I'm just going to generalize. The 3 days previous, the French had defeated the Prussians, and they'd fought the British to a standstill. And the two armies were kind of on retreat until they, turned the fight when they reached this defensible position near the village of Waterloo that Wellington had sussed out previously. And at that point, we get the war that we get, the Battle of Waterloo, which is one of the most famous wars in the history of the world. One of the things that great this is Bernard Cornwell, as he does in all of his books, whether it's his King Arthur books, his Viking books, his Richard Sharp books, he knows battle tactics, he describes them and writes them well, and he does in this book. And he doesn't shy away from the brutality of the era, the grim circumstances these soldiers had to endure just to be alive, much less just be alive when they weren't even fighting. It was just an adventure just to maintain life. And then the grim, bloody, gruesome brutality of war and the wounds that people could suffer and the illnesses they could suffer from it and the infections, and how just a little wound may not seem like a big thing, but a few days later you're dead. A major wound, I mean, it's just, he goes into a lot of that. I'm going to read I'm not going to read the whole jacket copy. I'm going to read just a part of it. So, in his first work of nonfiction, Bernard Cornwell combines his storytelling skills with a meticulously researched history to give a riveting account of every dramatic moment, from Napoleon's escape from Elba, the little island he was put on where he was a ruler of 10,000 people, to the smoke and gore of the three battlefields and their aftermath. Through quotes from letters and diaries of Emperor Napoleon, the Duke of Wellington, and the ordinary officers and soldiers, he brings to life how it actually felt to fight these famous battles. His detailed understanding and graphic description of the battles also brings a clarity to the ebbs and flows of these 4 days. It is a history of many key decisions and moments of amazing bravery on both sides that left the actual outcome hanging in the balance until the bitter end. Yeah, it's just a really good book. A really good piece of nonfiction by one of our best historical novelists to ever live. So Waterloo gets a solid 10 out of 10 for me. It's just absolutely amazing, breathtaking, and one of my treasured books, because I actually bought this in Windsor, England, next to a McDonald's that sold the most delicious pies I've ever eaten.